and welcome to another episode of Boring History. My name is Angela, and when I was younger there was a poem that we used to say around December and the lead up to Christmas, and that poem went a little something like this. Advent, Advent, ein Lichtlein brennt. Erst eins, dann zwei, dann drei, dann vier, dann steht der Nikolaus vor der Tür. Or sometimes the last line would be, und dann steht das Christkind vor der Tür. And essentially translated, it means something along the lines of Advent, Advent, a little light is burning. First one, then two, then three, then four, then Santa will be at your door. Or if you like the other version, it's and then little baby Jesus will be at your door. So I figured, seeing as Christmas is just around the corner and in honor of this little poem, why not explore the origin of the Advent wreath and the lighting of candles? In case you're not familiar with an Advent wreath, just picture one of those wreaths that go on your door, except this one sits on your table, and then it has a spot for 4 candles, and on each of the 4 Sundays before Christmas, you light one of the candles. Now, apparently there are records of Christians all the way back in the Middle Ages lighting candles on wreaths in the lead up to Christmas. However, historians who specialize in this area of history say that the first specifically Advent wreath actually appeared in the 1800s thanks to a pastor, or a Protestant pastor, by the name of Johann Hinrich Wichern. And seeing as he was actually a really nice guy, I think it's worth to quickly tell his story. Johann was born on April the 21st in 1808 in Hamburg. When he was just 16 years old, his father died and left behind Johann, his mother, and 7 siblings. And as I'm sure you can imagine, back in the 1800s, if the primary breadwinner disappears or dies, the family was in trouble because there were no other funds coming in. The fact that Johann was the eldest child meant that he had to step up and become the man of the house, so to speak, and go out and look for work so he could support and provide for his family. And just to make life that little bit harder, Johann was actually still in school, and he wanted to complete school because, education is important. So he starts by just doing some Latin tutoring on the side. But the money that he makes from tutoring isn't enough to pull his family out of poverty, and they all lead a pretty hard life. In 1826, at the age of 19, Johann becomes is it called a house parent at a Christian boarding school. And the pay is a little bit better, but he's still focusing on school and has his sights set on university. He even had some sponsors lined up who were willing to pay for his university, so obviously he was a pretty smart guy. And he graduates university in 1832 at the age of 24. And he becomes a Sunday school teacher, and a lot of his students come from the slums of Hamburg. And through these children, he sees the hardship that all these families are going through, and he's even reminded, obviously, of his own family's struggles, and he's like, I have to do something to help these people. And in October of 1833, he gets his hands on this old farmhouse, and I think it had been partially repaired by this senator who had also been planning to use it for some type of social work stuff. Can't quite remember. But anyway, Johann and his mother and 2 of his siblings all move into this farmhouse. And by the end of the year, so within 2 months, Johann has taken in 14 of these homeless boys aged between 5 and 18, and he's given them somewhere safe to stay. Now, a lot of these children came from broken homes, their families were criminals, alcoholics, had all these issues, so understandably, even though the children now had somewhere safe to stay, they still had a lot of issues. And they still get into a bit of trouble. But Johann doesn't give up on them. He starts giving them small tasks to do around the house and the farm, and he begins to think, what else can he do to help these children get back on track and have a chance at a normal or healthy, successful life. And he ends up with a woodworking shop, a cobbler's shop, a bookbinding business, and a working farm. And the reason that he's developed all of this is so that these children have a place to learn a trade which they can then take out into the real world. And eventually the whole operation becomes so big that he's like, I need some help. So he employs and trains up these big brother-like people who then help him look after the children and teach them the trades. And they end up trying to help kids all across Germany. and eventually they even end up taking in girls. The years pass, Johann gets married, he himself has some kids, and all along he continues to be this huge advocate for helping the poor and the disadvantaged children. In 1874, at the age of 66, Johann becomes ill and he can't cope anymore with the day-to-day running of the house, so he has to resign. But it's all good because his son Johannes takes over the management and the day-to-day running of the house. Then on April 7th of 1881, Johann unfortunately loses his battle with his illness and dies. Also, just FYI, I am not purposely being vague on what illness Johann actually had. It's just that everything I read just referred to it as an illness or a disease. Oh, and also the dates tend to change a little bit depending on which source you're reading, so don't take any of them as being 100% accurate. Think of them more like a guide. But enough babbling, let's get to the point of this video and have a look at how does the Advent wreath come into existence. Well, at the very beginning of his school or home for disadvantaged youths, Johann noticed that as it got closer and closer to Christmas, all of the children would constantly be asking, is it Christmas yet? Is it Christmas yet? When's Christmas? Is Christmas here? When is Christmas? Now, of course, we have to remember that during this time, there were no iPhones or readily available calendars. It was simply sunrises, sunsets. So, to solve this problem of the constant nagging regarding the arrival of Christmas, Johann comes up with the following solution. He takes the wheel of a cart and on it he places 20 red candles and 4 white candles. And this cartwheel wreath would act as a countdown towards Christmas. So the red candles signified the weekdays and the white candles, they were reserved for Sundays. Sunday being the holy day, of course, meant it was special. And then eventually, seeing as it had been a pretty good idea, the Protestant church also picks up on this idea of an Advent wreath, and thus the concept begins to spread. And the change of a cartwheel to more leafy greens, or I guess a wreath made out of pine tree leaves, simply stem from the fact that people were actually already using pine trees to decorate for Christmas. And let's be honest, it's a lot more simple to have a wreath of pine on your table than it is to have an entire cartwheel. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me. I've put a couple of websites down below for you if you want to read up on the topic some more. Otherwise, please feel free to subscribe. Please feel free to subscribe because I look forward to sharing even more boring history with you in the future.